Hey everybody, this is Colin G. Murphy and welcome to Colin Podcast About Real Estate show number 9. Today I am delighted to welcome Kelly Stumphauzer into the podcast booth. She is a fix and flipper from the Cleveland, Ohio market. She's also a successful property manager. She's also a very large apartment complex owner, and she's got a fascinating story from stay-at-home mom to wholesaling to building her own rentals to forming a large family of companies. She's probably one of the most successful female real estate entrepreneurs in the entire country, and she's got a fantastic story to tell. I've known Kelly for several years. I've always been a big admirer of her work, and I'm delighted she set aside some of her time to be on the show. And before we get to that, I just want to remind our listeners that I have a great website called colininvestments.com. That's C-O-L-I-N investments.com, where you'll find a bunch of real estate reports that I've provided free to download, which talk about investing in the post-COVID economy, how to progress through the different stages of being a property investor, to learning how to do your due diligence, find property managers, lots of other stuff. You'll find a bunch of different videos with different real estate education outlooks. You'll find obviously all of these podcasts as well, and some other tools that I'm constantly adding. We also have an active and growing Facebook group that you'll find on facebook.com/group/Colin Investments. I'm on Twitter, Colin Investment. I'm on Instagram, Colin G. Murphy. So please do reach out and let us know what you need. I'm always happy to talk to people about real estate and help you on your journeys. And also, if you are enjoying this show, please do give us a review or give us a 5-star review. Share it with your friends if you think they're interested as well. We are trying to grow it. It's already been growing fantastically well. I'm delighted with how it's going so far with show number 9, and let's keep it going. I hope you like what we're doing so far. So getting back to Kelly, everybody should listen to this show. Kelly's kind of a quintessential Cleveland real estate success story. We talk about how her initial passion for real estate came and how she got started from very modest stay-at-home background with little or no money to kind of bird dogging for local investors, to wholesaling, to buying her own rentals, to building a huge flipping company with 250, 300 flips a year. That's so difficult to build something that big. She also owns a very large property management company, and she's been investing extensively personally in apartments throughout the Cleveland market. So she's been doing incredibly well for herself. We talk about her early start in real estate about 20 years ago, how the 2008 crisis affected her. We talk about the Cleveland market and why I think that's one of the most interesting markets people can invest in these days. I think it can provide a lot of good stability because of the strong cash flow it generates. We obviously talk about COVID-19 and how that's affected her business and her market and where she sees that going. And we finish up the show with some really good advice she has for people that are looking to either get into real estate passively to get some additional income, or looking to jump in at the deep end and use it as a career and building their own businesses. So she has some really good mindset advice, mentor advice that I think you should tune into. And you'll find details on how to reach Kelly at the show notes. So let's get started. Let's talk to Kelly. Hey Kelly, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Colin. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to speak to you. We've known each other for a few years. I've followed your career with a lot of admiration, and I'm sure a lot of our guests have heard from you. But before we kind of dig into where you are now and the exciting things you're doing in Cleveland, can you take us way back to when you were a young adult and talk about where your passion for real estate originally came from? Or did you just dive into it for another reason and get passionate afterwards? Did you have family members that were into real estate, or did you have a friend who was into it? Can you talk to us about how that all started?
Sure, happy to. So I didn't have any background in real estate. It's not what I went to college for, and it was not my profession. I became a stay-at-home mom, and I left the pharmaceutical industry to stay home with my firstborn, and had really no introduction at all to real estate. But I was, I guess, needing to feed my brain a little bit, being a stay-at-home mom, but also type A. Found myself just in need of some extra stimulation. So I answered an ad in the newspaper for a bird dog position. And I had some friends at that time that were hiring real estate consultants, and paying a pretty decent sum of money to be coached on real estate investing.
Right.
And I thought that this was a good alternative to that. I could take a ground level position with a real estate investor and learn that way.
Hmm.
So that's ultimately how I got my
And this was
start.
when you were in your early
I was in
20s,
my
maybe?
20s at this point. I was in my 20s, so I got I feel like I got a little bit of a later start. A lot of my colleagues in the area, started pretty young with this stuff. So I was in my later 20s at that point,
Hmm.
and I literally just started driving for dollars, like base level, learned from the ground up. Back then, I was watching tutorials on DVDs on
Nice.
rehab, right? Like Robin Thompson, the rehab queen, and Ron LeGrand, and like listening to their programs and watching their programs and teaching myself all the lingo. And then, of course,
Hmm.
learning from the investor that I was kind of shadowing and working for at that time.
That's awesome. So literally just an ad in the newspaper. You had some friends that were dabbling in real estate in a more expensive way. You didn't want to spend that money, or maybe you didn't have that money, so you latched onto a more experienced investor and gave him your time and driving for dollars, and in exchange did he cut you into some of the deals if you bought them, or was he just teaching you and paying you a small salary? How did that work?
I think it's like most things, because I had a passion for it and I'm a pretty hardworking person. That position ultimately ended up evolving into other things. Like he taught me rent to own, so I did a little bit of rent to own, and it was pretty much all commission based.
Okay.
But through him, I learned the model, right? So I understood the fundamentals of real estate investing. It really made sense to me, the whole financial freedom path. And so it wasn't long after, maybe a couple of years after I started working with him, that I bought my first rental property. But that was back in the early 2000s, and probably bought 3, 4 rentals, and I was self-managing and for the most part doing my own rehab work. And then, as you
Hmm.
know, mid 2000s, the market just took off,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I want to learn how to flip houses.
So how
Um,
did you find the money to buy three or four rentals in the early 2000s?
well, I
Were
should
they properties you found yourself and put in some sweat equity, or did you have to save up a lot of money for down payments? How did it work?
Yeah, so I should back up and say that in the interim, I wholesaled a couple properties. I learned to
Hmm.
do that first. And then thankfully, because of the area that I'm located in, and just at that point in time in history, properties were cheap. So my husband and I at the time, or I should say my husband at the time and I had a little bit of money in savings, and then I had
Okay.
some money from wholesaling properties. And so that's how we bought the first rental. But as you know, back then you could buy for cash. So up here, it was a $20,000 purchase, right?
Wow.
And stabilization was pretty cheap, maybe 7,500 bucks to get it stabilized. And you're all into
Hmm.
a property for maybe 40K, and that property is going to rent for 750 a month.
Oh, wow.
And the refinance, basically pulled all of our capital back out. And so then we went and did it again, and we did it again. So it wasn't a huge outlay of cash. Certainly, I am a proponent of being able to do it with none of your own money, which is what I do now. But back then, I didn't really understand all those principles, and was lucky to have a little nest egg and a market that it's really cheap to to do in. So
They're great yields, all in for $40,000 and rents for 750. I mean, that's fantastic. And like you say, if you're refinancing them and you're pulling out whatever initial money you had in, and that's what call it the Burr method these days, I guess.
yep, that's right.
That's awesome. And so that sounds great. I mean, you started out, did some wholesaling, bought four rentals, five rentals. I mean, can you remember? Obviously, I'm sure it wasn't as smooth as that. Can you remember some of the big hurdles you had to get through in the early days? Were there people that tried to stop you from doing what you were doing? Did you find it hard to get deals, or to get people to take you seriously, or how did it work?
I guess in the early days, I mean, personally, it was hard to do it with young children because I
Mm,
was trying to balance being a stay-at-home mom and being present and enjoying those moments. And then, as you know, when you take on real estate, it's more a lifestyle than anything. Yeah, I
mm-hmm.
always tell people I work for myself and I can make my own schedule, but it just so happens that I work all the time. I don't know what it is about real estate that just overtakes your life.
Yeah, you
So I
give up the 40-hour job to work for yourself 60 hours,
That's right.
70
Yeah.
hours.
I mean, I love what I do, but I work all the time. So, I mean, there was that balance. And then, of course, there's always the naysayers in your life, right? There's so many people that have been conditioned to get a formal education and to get a formal job and to work for
Mm-hmm.
someone and have that security. And when you're saying, hey, I believe in this philosophy of financial freedom, and it's going to take a little money. We're going to have to throw a little bit of money. People that are risk adverse will immediately tell you every reason why you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
So I
And
got a
it's
little
often
bit of
people that
that.
have your best interests at heart. It's often immediate friends and family that tell you not to do it, even though everything in your head and real estate people you've been hanging out with tell you to do it. So it's not easy to kind of set aside those people's concerns. Some of them are just nasty people that are just don't care what you do, and others have your interests at heart but are still telling you to pursue a course, which is the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah, mine I think was the latter in the beginning, and it's just because people lacked familiarity and they don't want to see you get hurt. And as you know, everything's kind of a projection of your own stuff, and so people that are risk adverse, when they're interacting with people who are not afraid of risk, they just project their own fears. But that was really temporary. I mean, after a
Mm-hmm.
couple success stories, people go, oh, maybe you're onto something here. So,
Yeah.
by the mid 2000s, I mean, flipping was, I don't want to say it was easy, it's never easy, but the market was so healthy and the inventory was so low, much like it is right now for us anyway, that flipping became kind of the next progression in my career. And it's really my passion in this business. So, fast forward to 2020, and I bet I'm probably 800 houses in, which
Wow.
had you asked me back then, I would have been
Oh
like,
yeah.
no way.
Doesn't
No.
work like that. So look, I think we both got started in real estate in the early 2000s and did well for a couple of years.
Yep.
And then 2008 hit and changed a lot of things for the worse. And we got scared and we learned a few lessons. I mean, you had a really good start in the run up to 2007 or 8. I mean, how did that crash affect your rentals and your, wholesaling or early flipping business?
So I was very blessed not to have been in the middle of a bunch of loans or projects that were positioned to have given me a lot of exposure at that time. But I
Hmm.
had a lot of friends. It was like a bloodbath for them, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm very mindful of that now. Like, we know everything is cyclical, and you and I had this conversation. I think that we're heading into a little bit of an adjustment period. So I'm always really cautious on how what my inventory feed looks like.
Yeah.
Um, Back then I was actually not holding on to any inventory that I was not able to reposition as a rental. The interesting thing about my market, and I think it's probably a lot different than your market in Florida, is
Hmm.
while our prices have gone up and down here, our rents have always stayed commensurately high with the prices. We have some of the best price to rent ratios in the US, and
Right.
that's continued through recessions. It's now continued through COVID. Um, so we have that benefit. Prices go up and down. Rents have stayed pretty stable. Our rents have
Hmm.
certainly have appreciated since the mid 2000s, but
So what
um,
what happened to those $40,000 rentals that you had that were renting for $750 a month? I guess the value went down a bit, but were you able to hold on to all of those because the rent stayed at 750 or close enough to 750 and they're cash flowing okay?
absolutely. I mean, ultimately, that first batch of properties that I bought, I bought in an area that I probably wouldn't invest in now, and I self-managed. And back then I didn't make the repairs that I need to make now. I look at that as like sort of the platform of one of the platforms on how I learned not only what to do but what not to do.
Yeah.
But I held on to them, waited until the market came back a little bit, a few years later, and then sold those.
Okay. I guess the main thing is that if you have rentals that are cash flow positive, it's so much easier to hold on to them because what happened in Florida and a lot of other places that people had very highly leveraged rentals that were never cash flowing very well in the first place. They were just bought for the appreciation and might have been cash flowing
Yeah,
$100 a month. And when that turns to, and if you have 20 of those that are cash flowing $100 a month and then that suddenly turns to a negative $100 a month, I mean, that gets very tiring very quickly. And if you have to add some AC repairs and other repairs on top, you're and your negative equity, you're just going to get killed. You're going to end up selling a lot of those and taking big hits. But that doesn't happen if you have those rentals that are cash flowing well in the first place, and you have some reserves to do those repairs.
I think that's why, the Midwest to a large degree has always had such a compelling story, right? And I think it's also why the residential um, real estate market in terms of rentals has had a resilient story. We've been able to prove now through several market cycles what happens, right? We've already done it through recession. Now we're doing it through COVID. You see a lot of people that are in the commercial space that are making huge adjustments. People that have been selling on appreciation, as you mentioned, they're talking a different story when a recession hits. I tell everybody, are we experiencing appreciation in Cleveland? Absolutely. Some of the areas that I sell in is double digits, but I don't sell on appreciation. I sell on cash flow.
Yeah, I think that's prudent. Appreciation should always be considered icing on the cake, but never a reason to certainly buy something as a long-term hold in the first place. That's risky. So talk to us about where you are now, Kelly. I know you've had an awesome, 6-7 years building up a big business up there. Talk to us now about the types of companies you run and what they do.
Sure. So Prosper Cleveland is the turnkey business, and it's the flip business, and that's kind of my bread and butter. Basically just took what I was doing when I was new to real estate and have scaled it up. We primarily sell income properties to out-of-state investors that are looking for cash flow here in Cleveland. And we do that at volume, a couple hundred times a year. Still do some retail flips, mostly just because that's my passion. I love to do it. And obviously the market right now is very healthy. Inventory's low. There's a very big demand. So I'd say that's probably 20% of what we do is the retail flips. 80% is turnkey. As an ancillary to running a turnkey company, you have to have solid property management. So I do own a property management company. It's one of the largest residential property management companies in the Cleveland market. What else? I am a commercial real estate investor. So I own some apartments with my partner, actually, who is from Florida.
I know him.
You know him. So that's really exciting. I have some pretty ambitious goals about adding apartment units to our portfolio, and COVID took us a little bit off of a pretty ambitious track, but we're recouping and excited about
And the apartments, that's something you kind of buy and hold with your other partner. Was that set up just as an extra income stream that you have a slightly more passive income stream compared to the active income from the hundreds of flips you're doing?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And the property management, how's that going? How many doors do you have now?
I think we're just under 700 doors.
That's fantastic.
It's great. I mean, I have a phenomenal, I actually bought the management company a couple years back, and we've grown it. I was always feeding the business anyway with the inventory that we're pumping out. And, previously I had third-party management, and, I always tell people it's like I was managing a management company with no return on my time. And was fortunate enough that there was a property management company that was for sale here that had really great existing systems and processes and phenomenal staff. So I've been able to just leverage their talents and their systems, and then bring them in-house and pump our properties into it. And it's been a really great experience. I know a lot of people say they don't like property management. It's a really tough business, and certainly I'm not on the front lines. But overall, it's been a really positive experience.
I have a love-hate relationship with property management. I was in the same kind of boat as you. I've sold hundreds and hundreds of properties to investors, and I've often been tempted to set up a company to manage them and try and do it well. But it's such I used to own a property management company in Orlando, and this is about 9 years ago. And all I remember really is it taking up a huge amount of staff time, there being hundreds and hundreds of checks. And then at the end of the year, after, getting involved in a bunch of firefighting and a bunch of hassle, when I said, okay, so what did I personally make from that? And it was nothing. It was nothing. Broke even. And so, having 700 doors is obviously a lot different to what I had. But I think you've done it right. So how much time do you think you personally spend on the property management side of the business per month?
Not much. there's a few things that go along, I think, with setting up and running a profitable and successful property management company. People don't realize, like, I think investors don't realize, like, property management companies are in almost a no-win situation, right?
Yeah.
Because they need to please the tenants and they need to please the owners, and oftentimes that's mutually exclusive. And so
Hmm.
you're a professional problem solver, and whomever it is, it's generally hard to create a win-win situation. That being said, um, you need a pretty decent sized staff to handle communication, to handle maintenance, to handle project management, to handle billing. Like you need to staff up. So it's only at, I'd say, when you're past like five to 600 units that it
Hmm.
becomes profitable. And all the while, you have to have really solid systems and processes, and people like that are carrying out the systems and processes in order to be successful.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate that I have a really capable staff who likes what they're doing. Um, we have an ops manager that runs the property management company that is phenomenal. I wake up
Hmm.
on Monday morning, I have a KPI report. Um, I am usually not getting the fires, right? I only get, God forbid it gets to like a legal situation or something that they
Sure.
can't handle on their own. But it's been a blessing for sure.
No, that's awesome. I'm jealous, and well done to you. So talk to us a bit more. So what you sell, a lot of your bread and butter is selling properties to out of state investors. What's the average purchase price and rental yield, and why should tell us about why people should invest in the Cleveland market versus some of the other markets in the Midwest or Southeast.
Sure. So average purchase price, I guess, on single families, we sell everything from single family to 20 units.
Mm-hmm.
We're one of the rare turnkey providers that's kind of in the small multifamily space too, which seems to be very desirable for investors, and we're moving more and more into that space as we see the demand for the product. So on the single family side, I would say like average purchase price for a fully remodeled property would be about 100K, and $100,000 property. I'd say the rent amount would be about 1,100,
Nice.
yeah, about 1,100. So we always try to stay at that 1%. It's usually 1 to 1.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So why Cleveland? One, it's the return on investment, obviously. It's the availability of inventory. As you know, a lot of other areas in the country have dried up.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to find cash flowing properties or any inventory whatsoever. And it's the affordability factor. I mean, last week we sent out a deal of the week, and the property that was in the deal of the week was a $79,000 property.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous little two-bedroom home on a really quaint street in a B market that's going to rent for $850 a month. Even entry-level investors, if they're leveraging, which, as you know, capital is so cheap right now.
Yeah.
Um, you don't need a whole lot of money down to get into something like that, and you're going to cash flow really well. So it's affordability, it's availability, it's cash flow. It's our experience that we bring to the market. Pretty sure we are the largest turnkey provider in the market right now. And then, as you know, I mean, Cleveland has gotten a lot of national attention for all the changes in the revitalization that we've gone through. So have that as a good backup.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And is the housing slightly older? Are we talking about like 70-year-old houses, 40-year-old houses? Do you do a bit of a mix?
Yeah, older than that. I wish that we had newer houses. And it's funny when you're thinking the 1970s isn't like by my definition would be new. But Cleveland's a very old city. A lot of the properties that we're selling are very early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that requires from my team is a pretty sizable renovation.
Yeah.
With very thorough renovations. A lot of times that we're almost completely deconstructing before we're reconstructing even a turnkey property.
I think that's, I would, any rehabbers, listening to this, I would tell you to be very, very careful doing your first few deals in 100-year-old properties. It's a whole completely different level of complexity to renovating a 20 or a 30-year-old block house where you're just literally doing roof AC and cosmetics. And, for kind of turnkey people that are buying rentals, I think buying a 100-year-old house is fine. And obviously the cash flow is great, but you need to make sure you're working with an experienced rehabber like Kelly is, who are actually not just putting lipstick on a 100-year-old house, but you are updating and permitting, floors and electrics and piping and roofing and windows. And because I know you spend a lot of money renovating these houses proportionately compared to people in other markets because they're so old.
A lot of time and a lot of capital. And I think sometimes there's like misnomers with investors that they think, they're buying a turnkey property and therefore it's going to be a new property. It's going to be problem free. We take our decades of experience and we go in and we do a very, very detailed inspection analysis of the front end. And our construction work is very thoughtful. It's very thorough. It's very expensive. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, I tell people you do still own a property, and just like the one that you're sitting in right now, right? Or my residence, you have to expect that you're going to have some degree of maintenance and you're going to have some issues, and no matter who touched it, even if it was a brand new build or it's a 100-year-old property, you do have to forecast for some maintenance expenses.
You do. Maintenance and capex. I recommend people set aside 6 months running costs for any rental they have. And if you have the time to write down the age of the main components in a spreadsheet and the cost of replacing them and figure out an annual amount to set aside for capex, you'll be doing yourself a big favor as well. And don't get too paranoid or worried about the capex, because that increases the value of your home. A new AC makes the home more valuable than a 20-year-old AC. So you need to be aware of that stuff. And buying a new house is all well and good, but the floors and appliances and countertops deteriorate at the same speed in a new house than they do in an older house that was fully renovated. It's the same thing. So just be aware of that. If you're going to own long term, the benefits are real, but you need to have some reserves in place to avoid nasty surprises. But it's well worth it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the kind of elephant in the room, COVID-19. So, we've had a very unusual 4 or 5 months, one of the probably craziest kind of periods in our kind of careers and personal lives. We've got kind of high unemployment. We have a recession, but real estate in your market, in my market, in pretty much every market I'm aware of, certainly in the, sub $500,000 range anyway, has been unbelievably resilient. And prices in a lot of places are actually going up, and rents are strong and inventory is tight. How has this affected your business in Cleveland? How's it affected your kind of prices and what's going to happen next?
I was like everybody. I was terrified. I didn't know what it was going to mean for us. I didn't know what it was going to mean for real estate. Ohio was one of the first states to go shelter in place. And when that happened, I'm like, how is this going to affect how we facilitate our business? Thankfully, as you know, real estate was deemed essential. So we never really stopped working. A couple things happened. We put a lot of energy on the property management side into communication with the tenants, communication with the owners. The communication with the tenants was, hey, we understand these are uncertain times. We understand that you may be losing your source of income, at least temporarily, due to COVID. If that's the case, you need to communicate with us in writing so that we can put you on a rent payment plan. The narrative was never, you can't pay rent. It was, we're going to work with you and put you on a rent payment plan. And then as government resources became available, it was communicating how they could garner those resources and how we expected that those resources should go toward paying rent. And that was very successful for us. We had, say of the 650 properties that we have under management, a handful of folks that were adversely affected that had to go on rent payment plans.
Okay.
Certainly evictions here were put on hold, but the only evictions at that time that we had filed were, from previous issues. So thankfully, the management company was still on par. We were trying to facilitate, how do you conduct open houses, whether it's showing rental properties or it's showing retail properties. So that was a little weird. It's like everything in life, right? You got to roll with the punches and you have to be solutions oriented. So we made that work. To our benefit, I think when the stock market, as it typically does, is very reactionary to this kind of stuff, we saw more and more investors were like, I need a tangible asset. You know,
Right.
people started moving
They couldn't
into
handle
real
the stress
estate.
of the stock market. They wanted something a little steadier.
Yeah, whether they're doing private lending or they want to own real property. Again, I think the case for what we're doing here is pretty compelling. Um, so that happened. The demand for our product just went up, and then simultaneously we had a lot of folks in the market that were, either newbie investors or they don't do the volume that we do. That we're working with like hard money lenders,
Mm-hmm.
and the hard money pulled out. Everybody was scared, so we were
Yeah.
able to scoop up a bunch of inventory that we ordinarily wouldn't have been able to at really great prices. So yeah, I know it's a really scary time. I don't mean to be dismissive at all, but COVID actually helped us. The demand has never been higher for what it is that we're selling, and we've never had such great inventory possibilities as we do right
Wow.
now. So yeah,
That's
we're
fantastic,
very,
because I
very
know in my
fortunate.
market, inventory is just incredibly tight. Obviously foreclosures have been closed for a long time. A lot of sellers backed off selling their properties, and there seems to be a lot of competition for the properties that are available. But for whatever reason, you're saying in your market, because a lot of the other your competition that was paying a lot more for their money than you are, or their sources of lending dried up, whereas yours didn't. You were able to get their deals or even negotiate a little bit more with the sellers because it became a little bit more difficult to sell.
The multiple listing service is still crazy, right? We can't, it's tough as an investor to compete on that forum.
Okay.
But for people that, whose financing fell through, or, I mean, the other thing that we experience a lot up here is some people who are divesting, right? And maybe they don't have professional property management, and 50% of their tenants, they own, 25 properties, and 50% of their tenants aren't paying.
Right.
As you mentioned earlier in the conversation, that's very painful, and they want out. Well, we're in a fortunate position that we can afford to go in and we can purchase those properties for cash, and we can reposition and, issue 30-day notice to vacate and go in and do all the necessary repairs so we can turn them into, our product, our version of what a turnkey product should be. So those are two areas where we are realizing a lot of our inventory right now is divestments, and then folks that just can't get financing right now.
That's awesome. I guess it's because you built such a good business, because you run a tight ship, because you have your own management company, your own crews, your own source of funding, and obviously not everybody can buy, a house that needs a $70,000 renovation either, or a small apartment building. So that's awesome. You've definitely positioned yourself well to take advantage of highly unusual situations. So I'm very glad to hear it. And like you say, if it cash flows well, you don't need to tie yourself in knots about whether to do it or not, because if you're not gambling on appreciation. You're not biting your nails saying it's worth 150 now, is it going to be worth 130 in a year? I mean, to some extent you don't really care. What you care about is this a good rental? Is it going to be a good rental next year and the year after and the year after? And if you're getting a 30-year loan at a historically low interest rate, and you're getting the tax advantages, and you're getting depreciation and inflation hedges, and you're leaving the volatility in the stock market to someone else, I mean, why not? What's stopping you, right?
That's right.
That's awesome. So let's kind of start to wind up a little bit. What advice do you have, Kelly, for, what kind of a two-part question? What advice do you have for kind of people that, want to use real estate to create financial freedom? And one type of person is someone who wants to do it on the side, kind of passively. And then what about someone who wants to do it actively, like you were, to have it as a full-time job?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to do it passively, I think the best thing is to align yourself with the experts, right? So there are people like me in markets all across the United States that are doing this. And I would definitely say, you said it earlier, you want to align yourself with people who have had lots of experience, that have lots of references, that can show you a portfolio. You want to make sure those people are investing themselves and have been taking their lumps. If you are wanting to do it full time, for me, it's such a mindset thing when it comes to everything. You have to understand that, you know, the breadth of real estate investment is very wide. There's so much to learn. I usually tell people kind of pick your niche at first, whatever that may be. If it's going to be wholesaling, if it's going to be flipping, even if it's going to be flipping, you know, get into a very specific market where you can understand the housing stock, the entry level pricing, your resale values. Just become an expert in your specific niche. Don't try to be a jack of all trades. And then I think that you really need to pair that with a very resilient, success-oriented mindset. Because like with everything, you know, the payoffs to real estate investing can be quite large, but it's never problem-free, right? I mean, it can be very scary. And as long as you go into it with the knowledge that you are going to encounter problems, things aren't going to go as smoothly as you thought. But you have your niche and you're committed to learning through the process. I just, I don't know, I believe wholeheartedly in it. Love to see more young people, especially as like, you know, as COVID things going on and kids can't go to college in the fall, right? And we keep talking about trades, like more people need to get into the trades, which couldn't be more true. I think we need to be teaching our kids, we need to be teaching young people all the advantages of real estate investing and starting young so that by the time they're our age, they're in a totally different position.
It's people underestimate the advantage of starting when you're 25 compared to 35 is a huge advantage. I mean, it's just massive that, you know, you can't get back time, you know, you can't get it back, and you can just, if you can get some experience and start taking some action and find someone that can give you a little bit of advice, and obviously you need to give them something in return. You know, experienced people don't want to just give you an hour of their time for a cup of coffee. They want more than a cup of coffee for an hour of their time. Like you offered bird dogging services for a guy back in the day, where you got in a car, drove around for hours and hours and pointed out boarded up houses or vacant houses or whatever the criteria was. So get in that kind of mindset where you can help people and people can help you, because it's got to be two-way traffic. And I would certainly encourage people to put themselves in that mindset and try and spend some time with like-minded people and people a little further ahead of them. That's a very good investment of your time.
I mean, now, as you know, I mean, we're doing it right now. Your access to information these days is so different than it was, you know, when I got into real estate investing. I mean, you can jump on Bigger Pockets, you can jump on any podcast and learn more than, you know, what it took me 10 years to learn. Certainly nothing replaces like hands-on actually doing it, but I think people's access to information is so different now, and I would definitely encourage people to use that to their advantage. I
think so. So what kind of 2 or 3 sources of information would you recommend? You mentioned Bigger Pockets as one. I agree, that's a great place to start. Any other places that people should be digging into, or any specific books that you think they should read for real estate or mindset?
Oh, geez, you know, I started on Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's obviously, you know, where a lot of people started. And for me, that was the mindset shift. I think you can find a lot of gurus now for free talking about like more tactical information, but you have to start with mindset first. And you have to understand the concepts of financial freedom and why it is that real estate provides that. So, you know, and it's such an easy read. So that's where I went first. And then beyond that, you know, started looking to the experts. And then I would say, you know, find a mentor. Just like you said, Colin, I mean, trade something of yours that's valuable for someone's time, and learn from the folks that have done it. I mean, there's resources everywhere in everyone's market. They're out there. So
there are, and then there's still RIA meetings. They might be virtual now, but they're still there, and it's as good a place to any to start and hang out. And the people at those are always happy to chat to newbies. So yeah, no excuse for people to take some action despite the COVID. It's as good a time as any. So isn't this been a lot of fun chatting to you, Kelly? Really appreciate it. So how can our listeners find out more about you and your companies if they want to reach out?
Sure. Well, they can visit the website, which is prospercleveland.com. If they want to reach me directly, they can email me at kelly@prospercleveland.com. You can follow our company on Facebook, and you'll see all the affiliated companies when you do that.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure I put that stuff in the show notes as well. But other than that, thanks again, Kelly. It's great chatting to you, and I appreciate your insights.
Colin. Of course. Good to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you go, folks. That was Kelly Stumphauzer from Prosper, Cleveland. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. Like, Kelly's a friend of mine. I've met her 2 or 3 times a year at different real estate events over the years, and I've always been super impressed at how she grows her business, and I love her attitude. I love the way she interacts with people. She's a real people person and a super smart business lady. And she's got some great lessons for us there. And, she happens to be in a market that I think is going to survive COVID very well from a real estate investing point of view, in terms of like people that own rentals in that market. I think they're going to do quite well. And yeah, I enjoyed chatting to her. I think you should heed that advice she has about getting into the right mindset for investing. It's crucial. Do take your time to read those kinds of books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad should be obligatory reading for everybody. Go and get it done. And yeah, let us know your thoughts and appreciation for Kelly. You can find us on Facebook, on Colin Investments is the name of our group there. I'm on Twitter, Colin Investment. I'm active on Instagram on Colin G. Murphy. And obviously we have the website, colininvestments.com. You can reach out to us there as well. So yeah, appreciate you listening so far. Appreciate your support. If there's anything I can do to help you on your real estate journey, just let me know. If you have any ideas for guests, by all means reach out. I'm happy to talk to people with interesting journeys like our guests have had so far. And that's it. I'm going to tune out now, and I will be back soon with Colin podcast about real estate show 10. You guys take care, stay safe, stay connected, and keep networking. Bye-bye.